Marcus Hale stood in the kitchen of the colony ship Aurora's Dawn with a steady hand and calm focus. He was slicing vegetables with the same precision a surgeon might use, each cut even and smooth. Around him, the kitchen hummed with the soft sound of ventilation and the faint vibration of engines. The air smelled of spices and freshly baked bread, and the counters gleamed from his careful cleaning. To anyone passing by, he looked like an ordinary chef, a man who had dedicated his life to food and the happiness of others. But Marcus was not ordinary, and he knew it. Years ago, before joining the colony ship, Marcus had been a soldier. He had trained for missions where failure meant the end of entire squads. He had learned to fight, to plan, and to survive in places where survival seemed impossible. He carried scars that no one could see, scars that whispered to him at night when he thought he was finally free. When he left the military, he swore he would never return to that life. He wanted peace. He wanted to serve people in a new way. Cooking gave him that chance. On the Aurora's Dawn, Marcus was simply the cook. That was how the crew knew him. They did not ask about his past, and he did not volunteer it. He made meals, shared jokes, and reminded them of home during their long journey through the stars. For him, cooking was a shield, something that hid the soldier inside. Yet even as he cooked, Marcus never lost the habits drilled into him. His eyes scanned doors and corners without thinking. He noted who entered the kitchen, how they moved, and whether they carried anything unusual. He counted footsteps in the hallway and measured the rhythm of the ship's security patrols. The others never noticed. They only saw a chef who liked to keep things tidy. One evening, Marcus stood at the stove, stirring a pot of thick stew. The rich aroma filled the room, and crew members passing by gave him cheerful nods. It was a peaceful scene, almost perfect. But Marcus's instincts stirred when the diplomatic envoys arrived on board. The envoys were a small group from an allied world, or so the crew had been told. They wore elegant clothes, spoke in smooth voices, and smiled in polite ways. Most of the crew welcomed them with respect, happy to see friendly faces after months of travel. Marcus, however, felt uneasy. Something in the way they moved and watched the crew set alarms ringing in his mind. Their eyes were too sharp, their hands too steady, and their smiles too controlled. Later that night, when Lieutenant Commander Scifi stopped by the kitchen for a late meal, Marcus mentioned it. "They are not diplomats," Marcus said quietly as he placed a plate in front of her. Scifi raised an eyebrow. She was tall, confident, and always sharp in her uniform. "What do you mean by that?" "They carry all the right codes and papers. Command approved them." Marcus wiped his hands on a cloth, his gaze distant. "I know soldiers when I see them. Their eyes give them away. Their posture too. Those are trained fighters, not envoys." Cyril let out a soft laugh. "Marcus, you are a chef, not a soldier. You see danger in shadows because you lived in them once. This is a safe ship, and they are our guests." Her words were kind but firm, and she left with a shake of her head. Marcus watched her go, the kitchen once again quiet except for the simmering stew. He did not argue further. He had learned long ago that warnings often went unheard until it was too late. Still, his instincts would not let him rest. He checked the locks on the storage doors twice that night. He sharpened not only his knives for cooking but also the old steel pan that had followed him from his military days, a pan heavier and sturdier than any standard kitchen tool. The crew slept peacefully, trusting in the safety of their ship and their officers. Only Marcus remained awake longer than he should, staring at the galley walls, listening to the silence, and waiting for the moment when his instincts would be proven right. Because Marcus Hale might have chosen the life of a cook, but a soldier never truly forgets the weight of danger waiting in the dark. The next morning, the colony ship Aurora's Dawn moved through the quiet darkness of space, its engines humming with steady rhythm. Life on board carried on as usual. Crew members walked the bright halls, shared stories during meals, and looked forward to reaching the next waypoint. The air inside the ship was filled with routine, and routine brought comfort. But Marcus Hale felt no comfort. He stood in the galley, arranging trays of breakfast for the early crew. His hands worked automatically, yet his mind was alert. He had watched the envoys at dinner the night before. They had eaten politely, but their eyes had scanned the room too carefully. Their bodies were relaxed, but not in the way of true diplomats. They were relaxed in the way of predators waiting for the right moment. When Lieutenant Commander Scifi came into the galley that morning, she looked fresh and confident as always. She greeted Marcus with a smile and picked up a tray. "You look like you barely slept," she said, studying his face. Marcus gave a small nod. "I was thinking about our guests. Something is wrong with them." Scifi sighed and set the tray down. She folded her arms, her tone firm but patient. "Marcus, we checked their records. Their ship carried the right signatures. Our scanners found no weapons. You need to relax. Not everyone is hiding blades in their pockets." Marcus held her gaze, his voice steady. "You do not see what I see. They walk like men who trained for years in silence and discipline. They sit where they can control the room. Their eyes measure every exit. That is not the way of envoys." Scifi shook her head with a small smile. "You are a chef, not a soldier. You spent too much time in war, so you think the whole galaxy is waiting to attack you. Trust the process, Marcus. Trust the chain of command." Her words carried weight. She was an officer, and he was just the cook. To argue further would only raise questions he did not want to answer. Marcus lowered his gaze and returned to his work, slicing bread with careful movements. Still, as Scifi walked out of the galley, her words echoed in his mind. "You are a chef, not a soldier." Marcus wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe the war was behind him forever. But his instincts refused to stay quiet. They whispered in every corner of the ship, urging him to be ready. Later that day, Marcus watched the envoys again. They moved in small groups, always close enough to speak quietly among themselves. They showed polite smiles to the crew, but their eyes never softened. He noticed the way one of them adjusted his sleeve, as if hiding a mark or device. He noticed how another touched every surface lightly, as though testing for something unseen. Marcus sharpened his knives that evening, though they were already sharp. He checked the heavy frying pan that sat on the highest shelf. It was not just any pan. It had been with him since the last days of his service, forged of a dense alloy built to last. To the crew it was just an old kitchen tool, but Marcus knew it could withstand blows that would break weaker metal. Night came again, and the ship grew quiet. The envoys stayed in their quarters, or so it appeared. Marcus leaned against the counter in the galley, listening to the hum of the engines. His eyes narrowed at every shift of sound. The rest of the crew slept, confident in their safety. Only Marcus remained tense, like a bowstring pulled tight. He remembered Scifi's smile when she told him to trust the process. He wished he could. He wished he could sit down, close his eyes, and believe the ship was safe. But deep inside, the soldier who still lived in him whispered that danger was near. For now, Marcus stayed silent. He prepared food, cleaned the galley, and acted like nothing was wrong. To the others, he was only the cook, the man who baked bread and stirred stew. Yet every movement he made was calculated, every sound registered in his mind. Because Marcus Hale had learned long ago that warnings were easy to ignore, but danger never ignored those who were unprepared. And though the crew did not see it yet, the storm was already waiting just beyond their calm routine. The night on board the Aurora's dawn was calm. The ship drifted through endless space, its lights dim to give the crew a sense of evening. Most of the crew were asleep, leaving the corridors quiet. Only the soft hum of engines filled the air. Marcus Hale stood alone in the galley, preparing food for the early morning shift. He liked working at this time. The silence allowed him to focus, and the rhythm of chopping vegetables calmed his thoughts. The stew simmered on the stove, and the scent of herbs and broth filled the kitchen. To anyone else, this would have felt like a moment of peace. To Marcus, it felt like the calm before a storm. His instincts had been whispering louder all day. The envoys had stayed in their quarters, but Marcus had noticed shadows moving when no one was supposed to be awake. He had noticed the faint sound of steps in the hallway when the night was supposed to be silent. His soldier's mind told him that danger was finally ready to strike. The door to the galley slid open with a quiet hiss. Marcus turned slowly, knife still in his hand. At first he saw only one figure entering. The envoy smiled politely, the same false smile Marcus had seen before. Then more figures slipped inside, silent and quick. 1, 2, 3, then more until 15 men stood before him. Their fine clothing was gone, replaced by tight suits that allowed easy movement. Their eyes were sharp and cold. Marcus did not move. His grip tightened on the knife, but his face stayed calm. "You hide your skills well, cook," the leader said, his voice low and steady. "But tonight your act ends. This ship will be ours, and you will not be alive to stop it." Marcus looked at the 15 assassins. Their posture told him everything. These were not diplomats, not even common fighters. They were trained killers, every motion controlled and dangerous. He felt his heartbeat rise, but he forced his breath to remain steady. He had faced worse odds before. The assassins spread out, surrounding him. One reached for his knife, another stepped toward the counter. Marcus's mind measured distances, angles, and timing. He knew he had only seconds to act. He placed the small kitchen knife on the counter and reached for the heavy frying pan that rested on the shelf above the stove. The pan was solid and worn, its surface dark from years of cooking. To the assassins, it looked like nothing more than a tool. To Marcus, it was the perfect weapon. The first assassin lunged forward, confident and fast. Marcus swung the pan in a wide arc. The heavy metal connected with the man's arm, knocking him sideways into the counter. The sound rang through the galley like a bell. The others moved in at once, but Marcus was ready. He sidestepped, letting one assassin's blade slice through empty air. The pan struck again, this time across his shoulder, sending the attacker to the floor. Marcus shifted his stance, calm and precise, each strike aimed with the same focus he once used in battlefields. The galley turned into chaos. Pans clanged, knives scraped, and bodies crashed against tables. The assassins tried to overwhelm him with numbers, but Marcus kept moving, never letting them box him in. His feet remembered every drill, every lesson from years ago. He was no longer just the chef of the Aurora's dawn. He was the soldier he had once sworn to leave behind. One assassin tried to grab him from behind. Marcus twisted and drove the pan backward into the man's ribs, sending him sprawling. Another swung a blade toward his chest, but Marcus blocked with the flat of the pen, sparks flashing as metal struck metal. He pushed forward, striking hard, and the attacker fell with a cry. The fight lasted minutes, though to Marcus it felt much longer. When the last assassin fell to the ground, the galley was in ruins. Tables were overturned, food spilled across the floor, and the air was filled with the smell of smoke and sweat. Marcus stood in the middle, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, the frying pan still firm in his hand. Around him, 15 assassins lay defeated. Some groaned in pain, others lay unconscious, but none were able to stand. Marcus looked at them with steady eyes. He had not wanted this fight, but the fight had come to him, and he had survived as he always had. He wiped the pan with a cloth, the same calm gesture he used after every meal. To him, it was still a tool of the kitchen, but tonight it had been something far more. Marcus Hale was still a chef, but the soldier inside him had returned, whether he liked it or not. The galley was silent except for the low hum of the ship's engines. Marcus Hale stood among the fallen assassins, his frying pan still gripped tightly in his hand. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, yet his eyes stayed sharp. He had been forced to fight, and once again his soldier instincts had taken control. The galley, once warm with the smell of food, now looked like the aftermath of a storm. Tables were overturned, utensils scattered, and pieces of broken trays lay across the floor. Marcus wiped his brow with the back of his arm. He knew this was only the beginning. 15 assassins had entered, but men like these never worked alone. If they were on board, more danger was waiting. He glanced toward the door, half expecting another wave to burst in. The silence felt heavy, pressing against him like a weight. He crouched beside the unconscious leader of the group and checked the man's wrist. Hidden under the sleeve was a thin band, a device glowing faintly with power. Marcus tapped it, frowning. It was a transmitter. That meant others already knew what had happened here. The attack had not been random. It had been carefully planned. Marcus stood again, tightening his grip on the pen. He felt the old rhythm of battle flowing through him. Every sound in the ship echoed louder, every vibration through the floor carried meaning. He moved with purpose, his steps measured and silent. The door slid open, and 2 more crew members rushed inside, drawn by the noise. They froze when they saw the scene. One dropped a tray, the metal clattering against the floor. Their eyes went wide as they looked from the unconscious assassins to Marcus, who stood in the center with his frying pan raised like a weapon. "By the stars," one of them whispered. "What happened here?" Marcus lowered the pan slightly but kept his eyes firm. They were not diplomats. They were assassins. More could be on the way. "Go wake the security team now." The crew members hesitated, shocked by the wreckage and the truth in his voice. But then they nodded quickly and ran out of the galley. Marcus turned back to the fallen attackers, his mind already racing. He had disabled them, but they would not stay down forever. He needed answers, and he needed to prepare. Minutes later, the door opened again, and Lieutenant Commander Scifi stepped inside with 2 armed guards at her side. She froze at the sight of the bodies scattered across the floor. Her eyes widened, then narrowed as they landed on Marcus, still holding his frying pan. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice sharp. Marcus met her gaze without flinching. "I defended myself. They came to kill, not to talk. These men are trained assassins." Sira walked among the fallen, crouching to examine one. Her eyes hardened as she noticed the faint devices hidden under their sleeves. She recognized the marks of weapons that had been carefully concealed. Slowly she stood, turning back to Marcus. "You were right," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I should have listened." Marcus said nothing. He only set the frying pan down on the counter, its surface still marked from the blows it had delivered. The sound of the heavy metal against steel echoed through the galley. Syrah's guards began restraining the unconscious assassins, locking their hands and feet with magnetic cuffs. Marcus watched silently, his face calm but his body still tense. He knew this was not over. The truth was clear now. The Aurora's dawn was no longer safe. The crew thought they were traveling with allies, but instead they had carried enemies within their walls. Marcus felt the old weight settle on his shoulders, the burden of responsibility he had tried to leave behind. Syrah stepped closer to him. "How did you fight them off? 15 men against you alone." Marcus looked down at the pen resting on the counter. "I did what I had to do. A tool is only as strong as the hand that holds it." For a long moment, Syrah studied him. She had seen him as only a cook, a man who made bread and stew for the crew. Now she saw something else. A fighter, a protector, a man with skills far beyond the kitchen. She opened her mouth as if to ask more, but then closed it again. The questions could wait. Right now, the safety of the ship came first. Marcus turned back to the stove where the stew still simmered. The smell of herbs filled the air once more, clashing with the sharp scent of metal and sweat. He stirred the pot calmly, as though nothing had happened. His voice was steady when he spoke. "I am still the chef of this ship. But if danger comes again, I will do whatever is needed to protect the crew." Syrah nodded slowly. She could no longer argue with him. Marcus Hale might call himself a cook, but in that galley he had fought like a soldier reborn. And everyone who had seen it would never forget the sight of one man holding back 15 assassins with nothing more than a frying pan. The galley was still buzzing with tension when more crew members began to arrive. Word had spread quickly through the ship. People whispered in the corridors, asking questions no one could answer. Why were there armed men in disguise on board? How had Marcus, the quiet chef, been the one to stop them? Lieutenant Commander Scifi stood near the door, giving orders to the security team. The captured assassins were being carried out one by one, their wrists and ankles bound with magnetic cuffs. The floor of the galley was stained with the evidence of the fight, but Marcus had already begun to clean. His movements were steady and calm, as though restoring order in the kitchen mattered more than explaining himself. Crew members gathered in the hallway, staring through the open doorway. Some spoke in hushed voices, while others simply stared in disbelief. To them, Marcus had always been the man who smiled as he served food, the one who remembered their favorite meals, the one who made the long voyage feel like home. Now they looked at him with different eyes. One of the younger engineers leaned toward her friend and whispered, "He fought them off with a frying pan. I saw it myself. 15 of them, and he's still standing." Another replied, "He was just the cook. Or at least, that's what we thought." Inside the galley, Marcus moved quietly, placing broken trays into a bin, wiping down the counters, and checking the stew that still simmered on the stove. To him, the routine mattered. Routine kept his mind steady, and steady was what he needed now. Syrah finally approached him. Her expression was firm, but there was a new weight in her voice. "Marcus, the captain will want to speak with you. What happened here has shaken the crew." Marcus glanced at her but said nothing. He simply wiped the handle of the pen before setting it back on the shelf. Then he turned, his eyes steady. I did what needed to be done. Nothing more. Sira hesitated. She wanted to press him for answers, but part of her respected the wall he kept around himself. She nodded instead and stepped back, giving him space. The captain soon arrived. Captain Dorian was a man known for his calm presence, his dark uniform always perfectly in place. He stepped into the galley, his eyes scanning the damage, the restrained assassins, and finally Marcus. "I have been told you saved this ship tonight," the captain said. His voice carried through the room, making the gathered crew fall silent. 15 armed attackers, neutralized by one man. Our chef. The words stirred a wave of murmurs among the onlookers. Marcus stood still, saying nothing. Captain Dorian studied him for a long moment. "You were more than a chef before this journey, were you not?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at the captain but gave no answer. He had sworn to leave his past behind, and speaking it aloud would only bring that life closer again. The captain seemed to understand his silence. He gave a small nod. "Very well. Whatever you were, tonight you are the reason this ship still belongs to its crew. You have earned our respect." The room grew quiet again. Respect was not a word the captain used lightly. Marcus turned back to his stew, his voice low but firm. "I am still the chef. That is all I want to be." Some of the crew exchanged doubtful looks. They had seen him fight. They had seen the way he moved, the precision in every strike. To them, it was clear that Marcus was more than a chef, even if he denied it. Sira stepped closer to him once more. Her tone softened. "I told you that you were not a soldier anymore. I was wrong. I should have listened when you warned me." Marcus gave her a small nod but kept his eyes on the pot of stew. "You were only doing your duty. I will continue to do mine." For Marcus, cooking was not only about food. It was about giving the crew comfort, giving them strength for the long journey ahead. Yet now the crew saw something more in him. They saw a shield they had not known they had. As the night gave way to morning, the crew gathered in the mess hall. They ate the stew he had prepared, but the atmosphere was different. Every glance toward Marcus carried a mix of awe and curiosity. Conversations that would normally be light were filled with talk of what had happened. The crew of the Aurora's Dawn had awakened to a new reality. Their quiet chef had proven himself a fighter of unmatched skill. And while Marcus returned to his kitchen duties as if nothing had changed, the people around him would never see him the same way again. The Aurora's Dawn no longer felt the same. The wide corridors were still bright, the hum of the engines still steady, but an invisible weight hung in the air. Every crew member carried questions that no one could answer. Who had sent the assassins? Why had they come aboard disguised as envoys? And above all, who exactly was Marcus Hale, the man they had always called the chef? Marcus himself stayed quiet. He continued his work in the galley as though nothing had changed. He served breakfast, cleaned the counters, and checked supplies. But the crew no longer looked at him with casual smiles. Their eyes carried respect, curiosity, and a little fear. It was as if they had discovered a secret weapon hiding in plain sight. Lieutenant Commander Scifi had not stopped thinking about what she had seen. She had dismissed Marcus when he warned her, and she felt the sting of guilt every time she remembered her words. She decided the crew needed answers, and Marcus could no longer hide from them. That evening, Marcus was summoned to the captain's quarters. He entered quietly, his posture calm, but his eyes alert as always. Captain Dorian sat behind his desk, Sira standing at his side. A holographic display hovered above the desk, showing details of the captured assassins. Their equipment, hidden devices, and false papers all confirmed what Marcus had said. The captain leaned forward, his voice steady. "We have interrogated the men you defeated. They were hired by a hostile syndicate that wants this ship. They plan to kill the officers and take control before anyone could react. You stopped them alone. Without you, this ship would be lost." Marcus said nothing. He simply nodded. Sira crossed her arms and studied him. "We need to know who you really are, Marcus. No one fights like that unless they were trained for years. You are not only a chef. You never were." Marcus's gaze dropped for a moment. He had kept his past buried for so long, hoping to escape it. But now the truth was standing at his door, waiting to be spoken. He lifted his eyes again, his voice quiet but firm. "I was a soldier once. Special operations. We were sent into places where others would not survive. We did what needed to be done, no matter the cost. I left it behind because I was tired of fighting. I wanted to give people life instead of taking it. That is why I became a cook." Silence filled the captain's quarters. Sira's expression softened. She understood now why his instincts were so sharp, why his warnings had carried weight she had ignored. The captain nodded slowly. "You chose a different path, Marcus, and that choice is honorable. But your skills may be the difference between survival and destruction. The enemy will not stop with one attempt. They know this ship carries more than civilians. It carries hope for a colony, for a future. That makes us a target." Marcus's jaw tightened. He had known this was coming. Once violence found him again, it would not let go easily. Still, he answered with calm resolve. "I will not abandon the crew. If my skills are needed, I will use them. But I am still the chef. That is the life I choose." Sira gave a small smile, though her eyes held respect now instead of doubt. "Then you will be both. A chef who can fight like a soldier. A shield no one expected." Marcus allowed a faint smile of his own. "I protect my crew the same way I cook for them. With everything I have." The captain leaned back, satisfied. "Then we will count on you. The crew should know the truth, at least enough to trust your judgment. You earned that." The meeting ended, but the words lingered. When Marcus left the captain's quarters, he found crew members waiting in the hall. Their eyes followed him, curious and grateful. A few gave him quiet nods of respect. No one asked for details. They did not need them. They had seen what he could do, and that was enough. That night, Marcus stood in the galley once again, stirring a pot of soup. The smell of spices filled the air, wrapping the ship in warmth. To anyone watching, it looked like nothing more than a man cooking for his crew. But those who had seen the truth knew better. Marcus Hale had revealed who he was. A chef by choice, a soldier by past, and now perhaps both by necessity. And though he wished for peace, he knew the fight was not over. The enemy had tried once. They would try again. And when they did, Marcus would be ready. The next morning on the Aurora's dawn was bright and calm. The crew moved about the ship, performing their usual duties, but the mood had changed. Whispers of last night's events traveled quickly. People glanced toward the galley with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Marcus Hale had not stopped working. He stirred pots, sliced vegetables, and checked supplies as if nothing had happened. But everyone knew something had changed. Lieutenant Commander Scifi walked into the galley, her expression softer than usual. She leaned against the counter and watched Marcus work. "You do not seem fazed at all," she said quietly. Marcus looked at her with a calm smile. "Cooking is what keeps me steady. The rest, we deal with as it comes." Sira shook her head, half in disbelief and half in admiration. "You fought 15 trained assassins alone and stood your ground. Most soldiers would have been overwhelmed." Marcus placed a ladle in the soup and stirred slowly. "I only did what I had to do. The ship needed protection, and I could provide it. That is all." The door to the galley slid open, and Captain Dorian stepped in, his uniform neat, his expression serious but approving. Behind him, crew members peeked in, careful not to disturb the calm scene. "Marcus," the captain said, "the crew owes you more than words. What you did saved lives and preserved this mission. The reports from the security team are clear. You acted with courage and skill. That is why we trust you with the safety of this ship." Marcus nodded politely. "Thank you, Captain. I only want to do my part. Cooking for the crew is as important as defending them. Both keep them alive." Captain Dorian studied him for a moment. "Then continue to be both. Lead in the galley and protect outside it. Your past has prepared you for this role. The crew needs more than meals. They need assurance that they are safe." Marcus looked at the simmering soup, then back at the captain. "I will do everything I can to protect them. That is my oath." Sira stepped closer to Marcus. Her voice was quiet but filled with respect. "I doubted you. I should have listened when you warned me. You are more than a chef. You are a shield for this crew. Never forget that." Marcus offered her a small nod. "I never have. I just prefer the kitchen. It is my home here." Word of Marcus's actions had already spread among the crew. People gave him nods, smiles, and quiet words of thanks as they passed through the galley. Some stopped to ask about meals, others to offer a helping hand. Marcus treated all of them the same, focused on his work, but aware of the new respect in their eyes. Hours passed, and the day went on. The Aurora's dawn sailed steadily through the stars, the engines humming a calm rhythm. Marcus continued to prepare meals while keeping a careful eye on the ship. Every sound, every movement, every shadow registered in his mind. The threats might have been defeated for now, but he knew better than to let his guard down completely. Late in the evening, Marcus finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. He leaned against the counter, tasting the soup one last time. Its warmth filled him with satisfaction. For the crew, it was nourishment. For Marcus, it was a reminder that even in a life of danger, simple acts of care were powerful. Sira came to stand beside him, watching him work quietly. "You have changed how we all see you," she said softly. Marcus glanced at her and smiled. "I am still the chef. But sometimes a chef must fight, just as sometimes a soldier must cook. Both are important. Both protect life in their own way." Sira nodded, understanding fully now. She looked around at the galley, the kitchen tools, and Marcus's calm presence. "Then we are lucky to have you here. You are the heart of this ship and its shield." Marcus turned back to his cooking, stirring carefully. The ship sailed on, carrying its crew through the endless darkness of space. Outside, stars glimmered like silent witnesses to what had happened. Inside, the galley remained a place of warmth and life. Marcus Hale, the chef who was once a soldier, had proven that courage could exist in many forms. He had protected his crew, not with brute force alone, but with precision, intelligence, and determination. And as he stirred the soup, he made an unspoken promise to himself and to every crew member aboard the Aurora's Dawn. He would always protect them. He would always cook for them. He would always be ready. Because Marcus Hale was a chef. He was a soldier. And above all, he was the heart of the crew that now trusted him with their lives.